Welcome once again to In the Eye of the Solar Exalted story. This is Act 1, What the Night Driver Fears. And we are commencing Session 2, High the Night Sea. Gathered together in a circle, inside a circle of chalk, on a boat, bobbing quietly on the sea, with the moon hanging partway up the sky, making a white road across the black surface of the sea. They are limbed in light. Well, 4 of them are. The 5th is clad and perhaps protected by darkness. Hang on a second. I'm going to try and raise my volume. Is that any better?
I think so. I hate to interrupt, but is anybody else getting the same thing? It's a little bit hard for me to hear.
Is this any better or worse?
Much better.
Okay.
Better. Thank you.
Great. It turns out the gain dial on the microphone matters. The circle is illuminated in rich, warm sunlight, though the night is upon creation and covers the face of the boat. And the illumination comes from within the 4 of them, who are the chosen of the unconquered sun. The night driver has been speaking darkly, part in the circle with them and part in the past. And a discussion of the difference between the two has just come to an end. And the night driver looks around the circle as though seeing the world around him clearly in a way that perhaps he hasn't in the last hour that passed. And you can sense him shaking something off. And he sits up. I would like to apologize. I have brought my own weight to your introduction to one another, and I am afraid that I might have colored it. And for that, I apologize. That was not my intention. And you can see the wry curve of his smile, if nothing else, of his visage. And he says, and he continues, it is, I find, only when I am on the verge of being truly happy that the darkness comes upon me. A failing character, surely. I do, however, have one more heavy thing to share with you, but Vermillion Eventide, I think the weight of it would land easier if you were to show your companions the living artifact that I left with you and see its light and feel it on their faces.
As if looking a little bit like a boy called on in class who's embarrassed. He kind of processes it for a moment and then nods and retrieves a kind of burlap covered flat thing. You're talking about the bow, right? Yeah. And he almost seems reluctant to take it off. but then he shakes whatever thought he has in his mind and he unfolds it, and it's a gorgeous orichalcum bow. And even are we above deck or below at this point?
You're up on deck.
Okay. But even in
The
the
crew is all below.
relative lack of sunlight in the nighttime, the moon glitters across the surface of it and it sparkles. And he touches it, and there's a breath that almost as if like something being held in the air, but then nothing happens. And he looks at Grain and kind of shrugs his shoulders knowingly.
There are some small, darkly colored jewels set along the length of the orichalcum. And for many of you, you may have heard of the metal of one of the 5 magical materials sacred to the Solar Exalted, but it's likely you've never seen it except in an illustration. And much like gold, there is something about it that can't be described to others. And certainly it glitters in the moonlight, but as he holds it in his hands and it comes within the compass of the sunlight you all are shedding from your brows, it comes to a warm, rich life. And the gold metal seems to soak up and soak in the sunlight you all are shedding. And just on the point where it seems like it might burst into a sunlight of its own, a sort of dimness falls across its luster, like a shadow cast by something you can't see. It is nonetheless beautiful. You note that it's unstrung and straight, as bows are when they're not strung. Says the night driver somewhat incoherently. Did you, I mean, I assume you tried.
Again, Vermillion looking a lot like a student, looks away from the speaker addressing him and says, yeah, yes, I did.
Starfall is about 2 inches away from the bow.
And on the verge of exploding.
You did not see her get there, but she is looking at it from about 2 inches away, with like the most kid in a candy store look you have ever seen on somebody who is not a kid in a candy store. And she's like running her hands along it and sort of goes, huh, it's not awake. Haven't you tried to wake it up?
Well, Wellspring, you see Lost in the background cover her mouth with one polite hand and turn away, clearly smothering a laugh.
Vermillion's face, which had already turned slightly red, turns slightly more so. I had heard that there's some relationship between something like this, and but I can't seem to access it. I did try. Maybe I just don't understand the inner workings. The feeling I get from it is like, it's like I'm reaching towards someone and they acknowledge me, but they don't shake my hand. And I don't understand it.
Huh. Now that is fascinating. Without asking, Starfall picks up the bow and sort of holds it long ways, looking down the shaft.
Unless, of course, Vermillion resists.
No, he's too shocked to do.
Yeah, you could stop her, but
No.
Sort of starts looking at it from every angle and going, I've never actually got my hands on one like this before. It's so beautiful.
Maybe it's a bit like learning sorcery, because that you can spend a long time learning and studying, and people can tell you how it works for them, and it might still not until it kind of you figure out how it works for you. I don't know.
From the stories I've read, it seems more like it's like making friends, but deeper than that. It's like finding the person you can fight with side by side without having to ask them any questions. I wonder if I can help.
I would welcome your assistance. I had a memory when I touched it. It was dark, and I think that this will sound and he kind of chuckles to himself. This will sound silly, but I felt like I was the bow, and I couldn't see because I was facing down on the pedestal, and I heard something about an oath, and I think it was the moment it was, and he stops himself and looks embarrassed. Born? And then he shrugs helplessly.
Starfall nods like you've just said the most sensible thing in the world and goes, oh, so it needs a promise from you, maybe? That's a good place to start. I wonder if I can ask it. And her brow furrows and she lays both her hands on the bow and then her eyes close. And as far as you can tell, she is thinking really hard. And
So
she is
even
trying
before
to ask the bow what it needs.
even before doing anything, laying your hands on the orichalcum, holding the length of the golden bow in your hands, it's like a light has come on in your chest that you didn't even know was there. It's like finding something that you lost that made you incomplete, and you never realized what that feeling was until now. Even before you touch the orichalcum, it's warmer than your skin in the warm night of the Western Sea. And you know, with something that's underneath experience, that this is something remarkable. And you don't know if it's just the sort of breath stealing, heart expanding sense of touching orichalcum, or if it's some piece of history breaking loose inside your flesh. But you know that you already know things about this bow. And strangely, you're afraid to open your mouth and to speak them, because you won't know what you're going to say until you say it. And so you go inside the way you do, And you, even inside of you, there is you, and there is this warm thing. And it's like the way you always know which way the sun is, and its relationship to twilight. And you run your fingers through some instinct along the small stones that decorate it dully. And you know they also have a life all their own. And your essence comes alive inside you, and you want to pour it into this thing and wake it and connect the two of you. And something very quiet inside you. No. Something inside the bow, very quietly in that light in your heart, simply says no.
Starfall hears it and goes, well, I agree. But why? What do you need?
And then it's alive and warm in your hands, but it's something separate. And there is no, you can feel further answer forthcoming.
Starfall's eyes pop up and she goes, yeah, I didn't think that would work, but it was worth a try.
It spoke to you?
Very briefly.
Hmm.
It just told me no. But that's about what I expected. Actually, I didn't expect to get to hear it. I'm quite excited. And you can see she's basically vibrating.
There's an obvious mixture of both curiosity and worry on Vermillion's face as he reaches for the bow.
Well, it certainly seems like you have the right company in each other, says the night driver. He rubs his hands together, and one of them vanishes inside the folds of his cloak, and he pulls out a finely made scroll case. It's carved from the bone of a fish, and it has intricate calligraphic designs on the outside, and is stoppered in red wax on either side. And on the wax of the stopper, there's just the outline of what is unmistakably a tear. And he sets the scroll down in the midst of you.
Not leaping to grab it, but certainly leaning in. Wellspring's attention has been on the scroll from the moment it came out, and he leans down to examine the designs on its exterior. Curious, turns and says, and what is this? Something else you wish us to examine, perhaps?
Well, that's the rest of my weight.
May I?
Oh, of course. It's written in a very old language, which you may be familiar with, but I doubt your companions would understand it. So I was going to say it was as it was said to me in this language. spent time with it. I have added the PDF of the scroll to the resources channel if anybody would like to read along. I had the great pleasure to spend time in the last decade with another group of chosen in Lap in the South. And one of them gave this to me, maybe with some prescience, and told me that if I ever encountered another circle, that he wanted me to read this, to speak this to you, and to give it to you. And so I will. And it begins like this. I remember, do you? When the sunlight streamed from fingertips and kissed our weary faces. I remember, do you? When the sun broke free from the horizon and set the land afire. I remember, do you? When the circle was mended at last and the lost found each other and what lost no longer. And my heart inside my soul breaks. Such a reunion happens only once, not in a lifetime, but in an age. And our age is one of sorrow. And we break bread and drink wine and see each other for the first time again. And in our minds, if not in our lips, we whisper, how long? I remember, do you? When we sat atop the great mountain in the heart of creation. I remember, do you? When we broke the world and everyone in it. Remember. Very quietly in the background, Lost says, oh, as if she has complied with the night driver's command.
Wellspring, eyes closed and listening intently to that point, opens and glances to his traveling companion at her exclamation, and seeing that she seems all right, turns to thoughts as though trying as well to foster whatever memory is being requested by the writer.
Make a roll your intelligence plus essence.
Will do.
Your permanent essence stat, which is 1. Oh, okay.
If I am reading that correctly, that's a 4.
Yep, that's 4 successes.
Damn.
There is in the circumference of your memory, which is almost entirely available to you, there is a darkness of things. There is a darkness of no memory. There's a darkness of the unknown. And you realize that part of it isn't empty space waiting to be filled. It's a curtain. And it isn't so much in your memory as it is in your soul. And it protects the boundaries of this life from the last life and the life before that, all the way back to the beginning. And in this particular moment, as you reach back with the glow of your companions, it's as if the hands of your thought are brighter than they should be able to be. And they run through that curtain of darkness for a moment. And you sort of jerk it back because you didn't reach just beyond your birth. It was like there was something all the way back there trying to pull you in. And there was such light that would burn the sky.
Oh. Well,
Lost returns almost exactly the look you gave her moments ago.
yes. That is certainly something.
The
Is
poem?
it?
It's a nice poem. Does it mean something?
Vermillion is taking the bow and wrapping it, and his action of putting it back in the burlap is sort of an answer of its own.
I admit I am uncertain about the idea of remembering. Most of what I got are bits and pieces of nightmares, and well,
Yes?
sorry, not you.
No worries. It happens. He shares a knowing look with Lost. Well, I have found I have a better memory than most, and even I am surprised to be drawing this memory out. I will need to think on it. Nothing resonated for the rest of you the same way.
No.
The so ugh. Jude looks nervous and turns to you and says, "In truth, I didn't try.
Oh, should we be
I'm not
trying something?
sure I'm ready. I assume it calls on us to remember, well, to remember."
I don't think there's
And
I don't think
what
there's
little I
any
get from
hurry.
nightmares, I do not know if it is something I wish to remember quite so soon.
The night driver nods. I don't know that there's any hurry in Tears' exhortation. And now, I think that I have darkened your meeting quite enough. There are some things in the dark pulling for my attention, and I have a hunch that. And he looks around at the empty ocean and at the four, and then the five of you, that you'll be all right for the remainder of an evening. I'll be back tomorrow night. I encourage you to shake off my presence and make whatever further introductions to each other is in your natures. Captain, if you'll continue west by southwest in the general direction of Rondon and the northern Wavecrest archipelago, that'll get us on our way. Oh, and I have one other thing, which 100 steps light would chastise me for forgetting. And he pulls out a large and lovely conch shell that's edged in streaks of violet, as sometimes conch shells are, and you can see that its opening is stoppered with yellow beeswax. Then he sets it carefully in the middle of the circle. A friend of 100 Steps Light agreed to come along for a little bit and give you wind where you might not otherwise have it. So if you would like to fill your sails, Captain, just pull the wax out and tell it which way you'd like the wind to blow, and it will. And if you could make sure the conch shell is safe, that would be good. Because if it breaks, the spirit's connection here will not persist.
Vermillion nods, smiling brightly, and collects the conch shell as if it were a pet.
Well, that's all the gifts, bright and dark, that I have for the night. So unless you have any particular questions for me, I'll withdraw and return tomorrow when the sun sets.
I might have one if you have the time.
Of course.
Back on Tang, there were 3 additional groups of people, 2 members of each looking very much like myself and Starfall here.
Oh, noticed that, did you?
Yes. I'm not always the most perceptive, but it was
Yeah.
poignant.
Walking into yourself in a corridor does leave an impression on you. But there was someone else, wasn't there?
Yes,
There were
there
3
was-
people.
Yep, there would have been a large man. I was expecting another of your circle, and they seem to have fallen off the map.
Oh,
That was a little bit of chicanery arranged on your behalf by the Broken Order.
Wellspring nods,
we used-
seemingly understanding.
We used a little bit of coin and a little bit of magic to find some folks that looked a little bit like you 3, and made them look a little bit more like you 3, and gave them some places to go and things to do and places to be seen, so that if by chance there was someone interested in you who followed you into Antang, they would see you doing things other than being in the ruins of a first age temple and leaving via magic.
you mean they might be off my trail?
Well, that's the hope.
Someone has been following you?
I kind of drew attention when this all started. My people were good enough to give me a head start, but I haven't been able to sleep too easy for the last year or so.
Is it the realm that's after you?
I assume so. I assume so. There's always an immaculate monk or two stopping by my hometown.
Well, at least out here in the West, their influence stretches a lot thinner. After all, how else could I make a living?
Mm. I think I'm gonna like it here.
He smiles.
Perhaps someday in the far future, if the West is no longer a place you wish to be, you could also always consider the East. They have far less influence there than they would like. The Order as well.
I get the sense that's true of a lot of places these days.
Well,
Hopefully in on Tang soon too.
they've always had less influence there than they would like. And well, Look Shy is also made up of dragon-blooded. They are less inclined to conquer than the realm is, or to get involved with things outside of defense of the area.
That does sound like my kind of place. Although, I think I'm supposed to be here.
Oh, not now. Simply, it is another possibility for someday.
Mm. It's
From
nice
what
to
I-
have a someday.
One hopes we all do, yes. Well, I'll do my best to make sure we do. Names. He points at you, at Starfall, and at Wellspring, and at Lost.
Oh, yes.
And with that, I'll take my leave of you. I intend to spend the night looking for your missing circle mate and checking in with my and he gestures to Wellspring and to himself, but with our order mates and seeing if they've turned up anything. So I'll bid you do. It'll be very difficult for any conversation you have while you're still inside this chalk circle tonight to be overheard or in any other way construed. So you should feel free to speak. And I bid you good night. And he gets up
Good
and
night.
kind of nods his head.
Same
Stay
to you,
safe.
and good luck.
Yes.
He as you say yes, Vermillion, he pauses and kind of looks between you and the bow and shakes his head like, oh God. And he gingerly steps over the chalk circle and walks away quickly toward a dark corner on the deck, where he continues to walk away into a dark vanishing point.
Names. Yes. Wandering Starfall. Mostly Starfall.
And I am Wellspring of Truth and Guidance. You may call me Well, Spring, Truth, whatever suits your fancy. And my companion here, guardian of things lost and forgotten, tends to go by Lost.
She nods.
Starfall is staring slightly more intensely than is comfortable at Jude.
Jude. Just Jude. Small town. We don't have names fancy. Like, well, he looks at Wellspring and goes, confusing. Sorry.
Yes. No, that is all right.
I find that a little refreshing, actually. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Do you know his name? I suppose I can just wait.
Vermillion Eventide.
How have you been, Jude, since I last saw you?
He looks at you, tilts his head to the side.
You joined up with my caravan when we were traveling through. Sorry, you'll have to remind me what the term for the scavenger lands is used by the people who live there again.
Confederation of Rivers. Ah, right. That time from
One moment. That was my request of a reminder. Eidetic memory would not have the same request.
Sorry.
we were traveling through the Confederation, and you joined up with us. Patched up one of our members who had been injured. Taught me a thing or two about medicine while you were at it. In fact, greatly appreciated. I may not know much, but it's been useful.
Couple of years ago.
Yes.
Sorry.
Don't worry. Again, things
Looked vaguely familiar, but
Wandering Starfall.
So sometimes I don't remember all the names.
That is quite all right. As I said, things tend to stick in my mind more than for most. So no offense taken by any means.
Wandering Starfall is standing there with her hands on her hips, looking at you funny. And she goes, "Do you know everyone? This is weird."
Only the people I've met.
Have
Well,
you met everyone?
In creation?
I don't know.
No.
Sure feels like it tonight.
No. I think, met Vermillion, though.
yes, I definitely remember you. And his face kind of brightens. It took me a moment. It was a while ago, and I was smaller and smaller, he says. And he like as if anticipating this moment, reaches over into a small travel sack and pulls out a book. I had a sense I would see you again, and I wanted to repay you the favor. And he holds out a book to you that it's the next volume after the one that you gave him, and you know it probably by heart. There's nothing in this book that would have any useful information to you whatsoever. But he shrugs helplessly as if like kind of like in that way of like pretending it's not a big gift, but really kind of wanting you to like it.
Wellspring's eyes light up, and he happily accepts the book, knowing on his side that Information doesn't need to be of use to be worth knowing.
Hmm.
That's the point of information, is just to be known. So he takes it and says, "Oh, thank you. I certainly wasn't expecting anything like this."
The fact that you seem pleased with the gift makes Vermillion smile brighten even more.
Wandering Starfall squints at you and goes, "Well, I still don't remember you, but you sure seem to know me."
You were very young at the time. I'm not necessarily surprised. I would guess 8, 9, 10. It was back in Chiaroscuro.
I mean, yes.
Do you remember a traveling caravan that came through town and a possibly eccentric young man at the time who told stories?
I remember one or two. Some of the stories were quite good.
Hopefully those were mine.
Knowing everyone in creation would be impressive. Is that a goal then? Since you seem to already know all of us.
There's a few people I'd rather not know, Vermillion says quietly.
Yes, I
Good
have met.
point.
I have met some of that variety as well. I would not say it's a goal. I simply know those that I have met. But I've traveled a lot in my time, and so I've had the opportunity to run into many people all across creation.
Good point, Vermillion. There are people I know who really wish I didn't know.
He
So,
nods
So-
and yes,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
that's it. He nods in agreement.
So
Such
that's name.
connections, says Lost. Such connections speak of
out of
a
character,
weight in the. Oh, can you hear me?
yes. Do we all see Lost? Okay, check.
She's a tall woman of sort of realm-looking, refined features. She's wearing sort of slightly old style, kind of upper crust realm clothing, kind of like a toga. She's basically wearing a toga.
All right, just double checking.
And she has slightly wild hair and pale skin, and her eyes are sort of slate colored but bright. And she says, such meetings speak of a weight in the weft in the tapestry.
Are you
That's a good thing.
are you a dynast? He says with slightly widened eyes.
Oh no, she says.
Oh, he
Well,
looks both relieved and disappointed at the same time.
Wellspring
the way you might
chuckles.
the way somebody might say no if you asked if they were the thing you just scraped off your shoe.
I have told you in the past that you might confuse people, Lost.
Well, then we can be lost together, maybe found.
A question. I don't know what the rules are for this, but having essence gives you, like, sometimes you can sense other people's essence, right?
Mhm.
Does she seem like a person with essence, or does she seem like a mortal?
you think about sort of like gathering yourself and sort of efforting within and like sensing into the, and you look at her and you're like, that is not a mortal.
Right.
Nope. Nope.
Okay. Well,
And externally, I think that registers as him furrowing his brow and then thinking otherwise and then opening his mouth and then closing it.
well, that's names, which tells us a little. But like, who are you guys? Apart from circle mates? That's the word, right?
That's quite a word.
Well, I was for a long time up to about a little over a year ago, wandering instructor. I teach trades to those who wish to know them. And I read a lot. That's a passion of mine. He actually, saying that, reaches down and picks up the scroll left by the night driver and looks at everyone else as though to confirm they don't mind him being the one to take it.
You see Vermillion look at the scroll, and it's obvious just from looking at his face that all the characters mean nothing to him in anything intelligible.
If you all don't mind, I might have a look over this, commit it to memory, as it were, and who knows? Often when you study the writings of another person, it gives you insight into who they are, what they mean. But
I would someday like to learn how to read that, but possibly not from that yet.
What language is it? It looks a little like low realm, but it's so much more elaborate.
as the night driver said, it's old.
Oh, he meant as in capital O. Oh, oh. And he looks a little embarrassed.
Jude reaches over and pats him on the like it's fine.
Oh, go ahead.
Just to confirm, Paul, it is just old realm, yes?
Yeah, and what's carved into the case is a version of the glyph for a gift. But it has the way it's written and the organization of the character tells you that it's a sort of gift that implies a burden carried forward.
Yes. Well, no need to be embarrassed. There are certainly variations of languages that are old other than old realm. So it could have been any. But yes, this is old realm.
As you
I've
the
been-
only reason there's no guarantee it would be that. I knew it because I've seen but can't read some before. So if you've never seen it, how would you know?
What does it mean by a gift and a burden?
Well, as we discussed before, the
Wait, I thought you were well.
sorry, what?
I thought you were Sorry, I can't say that again without laughing. I thought you were well.
Started your sentence with well.
Yes, I am. But as you do, I also use that word where it is intended in a sentence.
Sorry.
I do apologize. I tend to make a policy of only making that joke once per person.
He doesn't always abide by the policy.
Yes. A gift and a burden. Well, that certainly describes knowledge, and memory is a type of knowledge of things to have come before. As Jude noted, this is not always something that one wants to know. Some knowledge is a burden to carry. I personally tend to find that it is a burden worth carrying, but not everyone does. So it could simply be that, or it could be something more. I would need more time to investigate.
Do you think that a person should be prepared for some kinds of knowledge? Do you think there's a way to know if you're ready for a certain knowledge?
I think that depends. I would need to know more about what it is that you are thinking of.
Well, that would
Certainly, as a teacher myself, I am familiar with needing to gauge when a student is ready to move on to the next lesson. And yes, there are generally ways to gauge that. Is there something you are wanting to be ready to know?
even though it's an obvious question that follows, he seems surprised by it, and he thinks to himself for a long moment and says, yes, more than one thing. I could use a teacher to tell me when I want to know so much about the world. And he eyes where you put the scroll. But there are some things that I know have been hidden from me. And I was told that they were hidden from me with good reason. And even though my heart wants desperately to know all the things that I've forgotten. And he seems surprised to have said that out loud, as if that wasn't what he was thinking, but then continues on, or that I've been kept from. But I also fear that there was a wisdom in keeping it from me.
Wellspring nods sagely, but his expression is one of contemplation edging on concern. Yes. It is unfortunate that some of the times that people say such things, it is very much true and to the benefit of those they are sheltering from the knowledge, but perhaps just as often it is used as a ploy to keep people in the dark of things that they really ought to know. I can only hope for you in your past it was the former and not the latter. And as to your seeking a teacher, if there is anything I know that can be of benefit to you, I'm happy to try to assist.
He seems relieved at that and nods. Thank you.
Normally, I too really enjoy learning and acquiring knowledge, but for whatever reason, I am much more uncertain about when it comes to before. Perhaps as time goes on, I will grow more comfortable. Surely nightmares aren't all that there can be, so it will get better eventually. Oh, but we're supposed to be introducing ourselves. As Wellspring indicated, I'm a chirurgeon. I mostly help. I used to travel around, mostly in the different countries and cities and small towns. More the small towns, really. They need the help much more help than cities or big places with lots of doctors. Around the Confederation and would offer services.
He saved Wujan. Vermillion exclaims and then puts a hand over his mouth.
Helped, and not as much as I would have liked, but all help is good.
Any help in that matter is remarkable. You must be very talented.
I try, but, well, there is always something more to learn.
Any
I
of you
know.
with a lore 2 or higher would know that Wujan is an island west of the Blessed Isle, but east of the West, or an islands, and that Wujan is best described as a hive of scum and villainy.
I would suspect, I don't have lore 2, but I suspect I know that, having been to Wuhan quite a bit.
I feel like there are a lot of places in creation that could be described as a hive of scum and villainy. I mean, even Nexus, the difference is that Nexus just has a fancy coating on top of it.
I didn't mean to derail Jude's narration.
Sorry.
There is always more to learn. There are definitely things I don't know yet, but going to work on it. Someday, well, someday, hopefully, there will be little I cannot heal. But not there yet. He shrugs. The important thing, I suppose, is to do one's best.
Yes. And to recognize the value in where one is, even if that is short of perfection. To measure oneself against perfection is to
Go crazy.
that.
Starfall is nodding along. I'd like to be able to make everything in the world. But like you said, I'm not there yet.
Everything or anything?
Anything, I suppose. I'd like
Fair.
to leave room for other people to do their work too. I always like seeing what other people can create. But
Forgive my being pedantic. You simply seemed like someone eager enough to tackle either of those goals.
well, guess we'll have to see then.
I have a question for you, Wandering Starfall. Says
Sure.
Alice. Do you think places are made, or are they born?
Oh,
She seems very serious about the topic.
I mean, I suppose it's like objects, right? So a little bit of both. You have to make them, but making them isn't enough on its own. It has to do a lot with what people think and the parts of themselves they put into it. So a little bit of both. Made first and then born.
She smiles only softly, but a light of pleasure and delight fills her features. And then she turns her head a little bit and looks sidelong at Wellspring and says, "You've found some more needful things."
We have. Yes, I think so.
I'm
Yes.
going to
So
blame this one on you.
Fair enough.
anyways, for now, I'm mostly a smith. I can do weapons and armor, but it's not what I'm best at. I'm best at little things that tick and wind and do things on their own. And locks and jewelry too, but mostly little things with a little bit of life. That's what I like best.
I should very much like to see some piece of your handiwork.
Oh gosh, do I have anything on me? Probably. Oh, yes. Starfall sort of sticks out her feet. She's been kicking her legs against a box, I imagine, and sort of sticks up out her feet and goes, "The easiest one are these boots. I outfitted them to help me climb a little better. I'm not that good of an athlete, but when you're clambering around on ruins, you need to be able to get a good grip."
Wellspring nods understandingly at the comment of not being a good athlete.
And
Obviously, sort of doing it slowly so as to avoid a lack of permission, although not asking. She reaches one long arm out, a small gold bracelet shifting on her pale skin, and she, interestingly to you, she touches at a join between the heel and the boot that you had problems with because the grip strength of the soles kept occasionally being stronger than the bond between the boot and the heel. Anyway, she sort of runs her finger along the stitching and taps the sole of the boot and sort of meditatively goes, and leans back.
although, is there metal here?
On the ship?
Uh-huh.
Well-
I think you're a cargo ship, yeah, but I don't know what you carry.
That's a good question. What
How much-
is? Sorry, were you saying something, Rana?
How much do you need?
Um, I can probably make something with not very much. I tend to be more efficient with resources these days. Maybe an ingot? See what I can start with?
Oh, raw metal.
Vermillion looks at Starfall and seems to be debating something within himself and then decides to say, just don't take it out of anything that's already part of the ship, please.
Tear something apart? You don't know me very well. So I'll forgive you that.
He's not certain how to take that, but he nods. What is Paul? What is Wujan? Do you know what the exports of Wujan are offhand?
Disease and villainy. No, actually, they're a massive exporter of the goods of the archipelagos. So cowrie shells, shells of any type, fish, whale products, volcanic ores, like volcanic glass. Basically, anything that you can find on the Isles makes its way to the rest of creation, generally through Wujan, or south through the Call.
I think the cargo hold holds a smattering of those goods in various quantities. And he says, I don't think we have metals, but there are some substances that might be of interest. We have some ores and shells, and whalebone is actually very useful, he says.
I will have to take a look in the morning. I can make something out of metal now. I can make something out of, did you say whalebone?
Yes.
I might need a few days, but it does sound like fun.
He nods. Oh, I guess you all already know that I'm the captain of the ship, but similar to you, Starfall, I don't necessarily want to make anything in creation, but I would like to see most of creation. He says, choosing his words carefully. I lived almost my entire life on this ship, and I've seen so little. Oh, and he looks at Wellspring and he remembers something. I did want to show you something. And he reaches into the same travel pack that he pulled out the second book and pulls out the book that you gave him. And it's almost disintegrated. He's clearly poured through it so many times, and it looks like the binding has been repaired and broken again. And it's just kind of barely holding itself together, but every page has kind of like margin notes, and the map has things added to it. And even at a brief glance, anybody could probably tell that like he's been adding things as he's been traveling.
If Wellspring's expression was pleased at the sight of the gift, he is downright joyous to see you clearly having cared so much about this. He looks it over and says, wow, I'm glad it meant so much to you.
He beams like a student having gotten an A+ on his paper.
Perhaps, well, depending on our time traveling together and if I can pick up the supplies, if you would like, I might be able to reproduce a more, what's the word? A less tattered replica for you to continue adding to. if that would be of desire, I can also fully understand the satisfaction with it as it is.
He seems excited and he nods enthusiastically. Yes, thank you.
Just need to get to the materials.
And for those of us who don't know, what does the book look like?
It's a leather-bound volume that has a strap that wraps around from the front to the back to bind it together. Yellowed paper of a style that has traveled with the author, having, as noted, seen probably a fair amount of wear as it was being authored initially. Other than that, the exterior is rather nondescript, but as Wellspring takes it gingerly to kind of review it a little bit, its interior is a combination of notes written in a print, no fancy calligraphy form or anything like that. Clearly intended to convey information more than to impress, but periodically there is a page with a striking charcoal or pencil rendering of a landscape that the author has rendered. All in all, it seems to be a original or first edition of some wandering person's travel guide that they might have made while traveling all over the world, but then brought back to be copied to possibly be sold. To be clear, I realize that fits the description of my character. This was not written by him. Some other wandering person who clearly loves to see the world and also share its beauty with those who don't have the opportunity to go all the places that they have traveled.
When you gave it to me, or we talked about it, I interpreted it as kind of like a publication of Marco Polo, like something like that. Is that about accurate? Or
Yes, with the one detail that in my head, this was the original version, like the one actually written, given to Wellspring by the author in his travels.
Oh my gosh, it's so worn now.
That's what it is meant to become. You know, you can keep a book in mint condition if you lock it away and tend to it just right, but then it isn't a very good travel companion.
Mm.
Well, as I said, it means a lot that it meant this much to you.
He nods.
Sorry,
Apologies.
I thought you were done with that soon.
No worries. Please transition us.
Sorry, I'm not normally used to being up quite this late. He rubs his eyes for a bit. We're gonna have to sleep in to make sure we get a healthy amount of sleep.
Yes, there are quarters for you all. I'm afraid that some of you will have to double up.
Do not mind.
Only rooms I've ever had to myself were not rooms.
That gets a quirked eyebrow.
Sleeping outside,
Ah,
you know.
Oh,
makes sense.
Sometimes
Technically,
when it's just under a tree, you know.
technically there's a bed in my room, but it's also an infirmary, so if that is needed, whoever is using it will have to find somewhere else.
I will happily make do wherever you can fit me.
Well, there are, let's see, there's my place and the Jude, and there's 2 other cabins. So I suppose between the 3 of you, I don't know how you want to split that up.
Lost and I are happy to share a space if you, Starfall, would like the other.
Sounds great. And then if our fifth ever makes it, they can stay with me.
I suppose their loss is your gain. And if we find a 6th, I suppose the captain's prerogative will have to be waived, he says, smiling.
Shall we then?
Yes.
You rise
They're
from the
fun
small
ones.
places that you've been sitting and stretch your legs and your arms and look out at the moon dark sea and the sky overhead laden with 1,000 stars. And the captain gestures toward one of the hatches that leads below deck. And you realize that something has been a little strange. Because as you cross the chalk circle that the night driver drew, suddenly it seems like sound rushes back to you where it had been being held somehow at bay. And you realize now you missed hearing the wind and tasting the salt closeness of the air. And even somehow you weren't really feeling the roll of the deck under your feet while you were together in that circle. And you're not sure if that was some magic of the night driver or if it was just the intense concentration of feeling the sun on your cast mark of another's inner light, which is its own headiness, you realize. And also as you begin to make your way across the deck, each of you realizes that you had a little bit of respite from the fire in your veins, but that fire is back, maybe stoked a little bit to a bubble by your circumstance and company. And that sense, that urge within you to use your power, to be great, to change the world, is a little bit heady inside of you in this moment.
So despite what he said about being tired, when the sound changes when you go over the circle, he stops, turns back, steps over it again to see if the ocean and other things quiet once he's on the other side.
Seems like whatever magic the circle held has been broken. It doesn't change back.
He sighs, looks at it for a moment, pulls out a little notebook from somewhere and a little thing to write, sketches the circle for very quickly, puts it away, and goes back to going to his cabin.
As you make your way below decks, I assume Vermillion, that you're showing them where they'll be housed. And I think each cabin probably contains a hanging hammock and a small bed, probably built into the wall. And then there's some stowage with other hammocks that you could hang up if more than one person's in the room and you all want to be in hammocks.
Yeah.
And you can detect by the small noises of the living and the smell where presumably the rest of the crew is quartered on the ship as you pass it, or as you pass an entrance to a deeper part of the ship anyway, and it smells like men. And those of you who are new to the boat, I would like you to give me a stamina plus survival or a stamina plus sail, whichever you would prefer. Obviously, the doctor and the captain do not need to roll.
Yay.
Yay.
Looks like a 1 from me.
Yep.
Oh,
All right. I know that was, yeah. There was some hope for humor. Both of you are a little bit stumbly, but you relatively quickly find your feet. And although the stuffiness and the odor of the ship below decks is a little bit challenging, you get to your cabins, and the sea and the night are quiet, and so the portholes are open, and fresh air is gently pushing its way into the room, and so you're sort of saved from the claustrophobia of the hall. And so you all take to your cabins. Vermillion waiting for you in the hall, looking like so his rack. He's wearing kind of his night tunic and like a little cap, a jaunty little cap, and is barefoot as he is most of the time. And he kind of like wiggles with his eyebrows towards your quarters, like, I want to hear the story. Come on. What's going on?
Good night, Rack.
You all hear from the hallway and a stomping of bare feet.
The doctor quickly says, tomorrow is fine. We all should probably be getting some rest now. It's healthier to make sure you get a full night's sleep. And it's late enough.
Sage advice, which I think gets a bit of a glare or knowing look from Lost, who knows that as soon as Wellspring goes into their space, sets all of his things down and prepares for bed, will attempt to spend at least half an hour examining that scroll and pondering its significance before having the wisdom to let himself sleep.
Absolutely. So you're going to set about that. Is anybody else going to get up to anything?
Wandering Starfall debates trying to find her way down to the cargo hold to examine some of those very interesting materials that Vermillion mentioned, but mostly due to the continued swaying of the ship, her better judgment kicks in, and instead she spends half an hour daydreaming of orichalcum before falling asleep.
Vermillion,
I assume it's pretty late.
it is late enough to
Yeah.
be early.
That's what I figured. So he'll probably look reluctantly at the few books and things he has in the room, but will do a couple stretches and then go to bed because it is past his bedtime.
Vermillion, tonight's night crew has been lurking out of sight, and you see that the three of them that are, working the ship tonight have reemerged onto the deck and are busy about the business of running the ship by night, which is relatively simple. And they obviously, as you come on deck, they all sort of straighten up and kind of nod and give you the sign that they're about their work, and then they get to it unless you call out to them or anything.
I think I take a look at their work, and I give them encouragement, and I seem to know exactly the right words that fills every person with a sense of pride in what they've accomplished before I wander off towards my quarters.
Nice. They seem well gladdened. Can you guys hear the music that's playing in my background?
Yes, on and off.
Yeah, it
Okay,
comes
all right,
in and then tends to break.
Yeah, I'm gonna not do that because I don't have it set up on this computer. So shortly after you all separate, a voice humming rises within the ship, and somehow the music of the voice rising and falling like the ocean all around you seems to permeate through deck and wood and wrap the ship in a soft cocoon of sound, and it's just a wordless woman's humming, rising and falling, and wandering back in and out of itself. And there's something beautiful and hopeful about it, and also something sad. The way that you might be sad about a partner lost to long years, or about missing something like your childhood, which no longer exists anywhere in the world except inside of you. And there's something in the music that both acts as a counter agent to the light fulminating in your blood, but also kindles you toward whatever hopefulness lives already inside you. And on that note, we're a couple of hours in, why don't we take 5 or 10 minutes and do whatever is needed, and I'll see you all back here in a little bit.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So, I'm not sure how well, without attempting a terrible fake accent that I don't want to attempt, it's coming across that he's uncertain with the language as opposed to just nervous. And so I want to see how well it's going and whether or not I want to try and just drop that.
It felt like a little bit of both,
Okay.
I thought.
I mean, to
So
be fair,
that's
we're
good.
talking about memories, so maybe it is both.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure at least part of it is the uncertainty of the language coming across.
It works
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it was great. It-
Okay, cool.
yeah, I could feel you. I could feel you in that place of struggling with structure. So that was kind of fun.
All right, good. Like, I'm trying it, but you don't know what you sound like
Yeah.
to other people when you try stuff like that. So
Yeah. No, I think it's great.
thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Oh,
Yeah.
whatever song you wanted us to listen to, can you post it so that I can listen to it?
Oh, that's
Oh,
good.
I don't have an easy
and-
link for it.
Oh, okay.
Rana, just my only thought on the language thing would be normally people stutter or like make sort of filler noises while they're thinking if they're struggling with a new language. If that might help me know when you are working out, or when Jude is working out what he is saying, and when there's just a long pause that I feel like I should be filling.
Okay. Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you. I will work on it.
Absolutely. Because I don't want to talk over things that you're about to do just because I'm like eager to keep talking.
John, I put the link in the resources channel if anybody wants to listen to the music. It's in the
Yay.
resources channel. And we'll be back in 8 minutes.
Thank you so much. See you in a minute.
I don't know if everyone's back yet. I'm willing to wait for.
That's okay. They don't necessarily need to be privy to what happens alone in your quarters.
I suppose.
I mean, of course, I know they can all separate, but
I am here if you would like me not to be here, though.
Ditto.
yeah, it's fine. I assume you carefully break the wax seal on one side of the scroll holder. You're familiar. This kind of scroll case is extremely common. It's sort of a realm standard. You withdraw it. It's a vertical calligraphy, common of the realm's various writing systems, and it's clearly done with a thin brush, and you think the ink is squid. And the paper is an extremely fine southern rice paper. The calligraphy is gorgeously executed, as you would expect of anyone who's going to attempt the language of the old realm. And although it's not the kind of treatise or koan you might find still visible in old realm on the wall of an ancient temple, it's a gorgeous physical expression and a rich outpouring together. And if you would like, and so are you curious about the language, about the language of the old realm, and how and what it might be saying, in addition to presumably the bastardized version that the Night Driver gave you? Or are you curious about the construction of the piece, or what are you gonna look into?
I will admit that Wellspring may find himself falling asleep before he can look through all of the things about the scroll that he wishes to. But I think very much as noted, the whether there is a more specific or interesting translation or meaning to the words, as well as whether there's anything about he spends a lot of time reading. So something to be said about the type of paper or parchment itself, the material of the scroll, whether the hand of the author seems sure or conflicted, steady or unstable, and I had one more very specific thing. I'm now blanking. I don't know. Yeah, just and I think this will be something he honestly thinks about in the future, but if there is anything hidden, view by candlelight type things, or a style of additional language around the brush strokes and the direction that they flick off of the letters that are written, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just everything that a piece of paper and the material written upon it could possibly tell someone. He wants to know, not because he's suspicious, but just because why would one not look for such things?
Do you have like a craft bookmaking skill? Do you have a craft skill?
I do not
that might
currently.
play? Okay.
No.
Great. So then as regards matériel, that would be a perception plus investigation.
Very well. That for me is only 3 dice. So I may not see much in the results, but we can get that put together.
Nope. Just for the future, in case I forget, if you ever sleep wrapped in a song of the guardian of things lost and forgotten, you automatically recover willpower in addition to any other recoveries you might be attempting.
Wow.
Repeat that again.
If you should ever sleep again, wrapped in the song of the guardian of things lost and forgotten, as you are tonight, you automatically regain a willpower in addition to any other recoveries you might be attempting.
So is that in addition to the normal willpower regained at sleep?
Yes.
Oh, cool. That is impressive.
This is very exciting news to me.
I wanted to make sure that I'd heard that correctly, because I was like, wait.
Yep. Yes. Everything
actually
about
managed to roll a total of 3 successes on 3 dice.
Yeah, everything about the scroll is fine, as was obvious from an initial examination. This is, in fact, a type of southern rice paper, and it's clearly made by a talented craftsman. It's made for its low acid content and high strength, durability, its absorbency, so that it will take ink instead of rejecting it and encouraging the ink to spill beyond the calligrapher's designs. This is the kind of calligraphy that like the lords of the realm would order from Lap and use. The scroll case, you think, actually is old. You don't think it's recently made. It it has a softness and sort of signs of wear that tell you that it's been around for a while. Although you don't get anything more really about its origin or crafting. The wax was sealed by hand. There are microscopic signs of fingerprints around the edges of the red wax that sealed it, and the teardrop impressed in the wax was not done by a seal, but was in fact done very quickly, somehow by hand with something cold. And so a skilled artist did it. Certainly, you think the same artist that did the calligraphy. Just looking at the calligraphy as oh, that's going to be linguistics. Yeah. So that's and the ink is squid ink. There are no mistakes that have been elided from the paper. There is as you hold it up to lamplight, you see that there's as there sometimes is, there's an invisible to the naked eye, but there's like a chop impression in the upper right corner of the paper, which is the same tear shape that was on the wax. So that must be the author's signature or symbol or something. It isn't sort of a mot for a character in the high realm language or anything. It's clearly just a perfect teardrop. Yeah. And so then turning to the poem itself, that would be an intelligence plus linguistics.
All right, let me get that one together.
Well,
There is a reason.
this is the controlled hand of the simultaneously free and controlled hand of a master at work. This was you can tell from the organization of the characters and the brush strokes that the poem was not conceived of in advance or written on something else and then copied here, but that this is you can tell from the way the brush strokes are both contained and wild, and the way they sort of splash off the end of the characters, that this was written in a single moment of inspiration by the artist. And it's very clear that additional signs that they were masters. There are no droplets on the paper. There's no cast off. There's no brushing from a sleeve. And so clearly the work of an inspired master. There are some interesting notes about the language that the night driver used versus the language that's in this poem. When the poem speaks of sorrow, it isn't the word that's used in Old Realm in Old Realm can be and often is translated as sorrow. Although, as many things in Old Realm, the way that the character is drawn and its placement, in the way that the author constructs the age of sorrow, there is a connotation that it isn't so much sorrow as grief, and the way and the character that's chosen for that word and the way it's drawn, you see that it's the kind of grief that that annihilates the self, leaving one free. If that makes any sense to you. Sort of leaving
I
one
think-
free of the weight of the self.
I think there's certainly a sense where that makes sense.
The way the word again is used in the poem, and particularly the way it's drawn when the poem says, we break bread and drink wine. Those are translated as bread and wine, but they're more like placeholders for sustaining the body with others. And the word and again, and the word again, particularly the way it's used with the bread and wine, has a sense of deja vu to it, like a dream-like deja vu. The part of the poem, the question, how long? There's a way that in sea tongue, asking how long is sort of an open-ended thought, but this is a literal, like, asking for an accounting of time somehow, and maybe an accounting for the way the time was spent. And then the we that's used in the poem, particularly toward the end, when the author speaks of us breaking the world and everyone in it. It's an uncontained we that is meant to include the reader. And so those are the extremely nerdy highlights of the poem as it exists in the old realm.
Amazing. Spectacular.
That was applause because that was wonderful.
I think through some combination of his own stamina and the insistent encouragement of Lost, Wellspring eventually makes his way to bed, intensely satisfied after having very carefully and caringly put the scroll away.
Those of you who may not always find friendship in your dreams, tonight find either that sleep was a black and dreamless place in which you rested, or that your dreams were sort of milkily distant. And you wake with the sun approaching its zenith in the sky above, and the ship riding a little more excitedly in the waters of the ocean. At the barest sign that you are awake and that you might be intending to go out a mate who apparently has been lurking in the hallway comes up to you. He's thin and wiry and kind of small, but with a little bit of a pot belly under his striped shirt, and he's got sort of long gray-green hair that's partly caught under a mate's cap. And he has what are probably perpetually rosy and sunburned cheeks. And he shows you a wide smile with many gaps, and declares that this morning there's food for you on the deck up by the captain's place. Yeah, so and I should go fetch the coffee because there's coffee, which I expect you'll be wanting, and so I'll go fetch that, and also butter. It's best not to leave the butter on the deck, and because of the sun, and also because of rack, and well, and furthermore that I should stop talking now. And he turns.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you. How are you feeling today?
Oh, and he turns to go, and then he turns back and he says, "Oh, thanks for asking. Nobody ever asks Article how Article's doing, and well, frankly, I'm quite well, and I was tasked with raiding the larder and making breakfast, and I'm quite thrilled to have done it, and I'm hoping you'll enjoy it."
I'm sure I will.
Right. I'll go get things. And he fairly hops away and grabs the edge of a ladder and slides down below decks.
I don't know if anyone else is out besides Jude. Jude is looking very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in the morning.
I think Wellspring will have been rousing to hear that introduction as well, and was equally inclined to thank Article, but acquiesced to Jude, who beat him to it.
How are you doing this morning?
All right. It's taking a bit to get used to ship life, as it were, but I'm in high spirits on the high seas.
Ah, yes, that's the first time was very and he says a word in river speak that kind of both indicates something that's interesting and exciting, but also kind of uncomfortable at the same time. Right, you speak river speak. I can actually use that term.
Yes, certainly. If it is more comfortable for you to converse that way, I'm happy to use that language.
Well,
though preferably not in the company of others who would feel left out.
no, and I should get more used to sea tongue anyway. Hopefully I'm not doing too bad for only having learned it about 6 months ago. So
No, I think you've made impressive progress if that is the case.
I just need to keep working on it. Just sometimes it's not the most comfortable. And the words escape me, but it's good to get practice at it. I'm sure I'll keep getting better over time.
That is usually the way of things. Learning is often both an uncomfortable and rewarding experience.
Isn't that the truth?
There is a glint in Wellspring's eyes that those who know him very well would recognize as the "I could have made another pun here, but will not" look.
So could I.
You all find yourselves on deck a little while later, and some chairs that maybe have seen better days, but that no longer, but that nonetheless are sturdy enough, are gathered around a box over which a blue tablecloth has been laid, and there are the kinds of metal dishes set in a larger metal dish that are common to communal meals that you may have seen happen in the desert kingdoms, but that also are quite handy for using on the deck of a ship that moves around quite a bit. And so there are various metal bowls brimming with the bounty of the sea. So there are some fried slices of octopus and some salted fish that have obviously been revivified with some strong smelling herb that is sort of green and delightful and unfamiliar. And there's some kind of coconut broth brew with little cups that you must dip in to drink it. And then there are some small breads, sort of, that must be made with some kind of coconut milk or something, from the way that they're soft and they smell of the Western Isles, that are sort of poked between the bowls here and there to sort of hold everything in place, but that you can use to dip and kind of you pick up the food with. Vermillion is there with Lost, and she's been asking you questions about the ship, and just about little details about how the ship works, and how you're going to get where you're going, and what lies ahead, and that kind of thing. And so you're just sort of chatting to her about how you have charts, and you some of the charts are ones that you got from Wellspring, and you've updated and annotated from other sources. You've just been chatting about that as the others kind of file in.
And I think for Vermillion's part, he has an equally enthusiastic curiosity about Lost and her singing voice and who she is. I don't know if she deflects his questions, but he seems very fascinated by her.
She sort of shrugs off the singing as though it's no big deal. She talks about it as getting lost. She describes her singing as getting lost.
There's something about that in Vermillion's eyes, there's a recognition and an understanding. And I think as the others kind of filter on deck, the two of them are talking, but at that moment, Vermillion is gazing towards the horizon, which looks just like ocean, but it looks like he's looking at an island that nobody can see. And there's probably a feeling of like, there's no telling how long he's been on deck. It's entirely possible that he's been there since the moment the sun broke the horizon. But he seems chipper, and he's very excited once the others make their way on board. The food is untouched. He was clearly waiting for all of you to arrive.
Good morning.
Captain, Miss Lost, how do you fare today?
Oh, I was. She had some questions about sailing, and well, I don't think I've learned quite a lot, but I don't think I'm very good at explaining what I've learned. But I've been excited to share. It's oftentimes when you speak out loud the things that you've learned that you gain even another insight.
Well spoken.
Agreed. And really, if most of the time you spent is around sailors and such, probably there's not been much chance before.
Uh, no, it was for most of my life. It was quite the other direction, I'm afraid. He says with a wry smile.
Miss Lost, how do you fare?
Oh, Jude, how kind of you to inquire. Well, I found myself again this morning, so that's nice.
I'm glad to hear that. He looks slightly confused, but also slightly intrigued by this statement.
Did you sleep well?
Hopefully you. Indeed, it was a very nice slumber. Nicer than I've had, well, in a little bit. Ready to face the day.
I will admit to having slept quite contentedly myself after the perhaps questionable decision to stay up just a tad later studying that scroll that our friend the night driver left with us. It is quite remarkable.
Jude looks at you. It was already late. Hopefully not too late, I hope, because really, sleep is important.
And Vermillion talks over the end of
You
that
need to
and
get
says,
good sleep.
"Did you find out anything interesting?"
Wellspring
Vermillion's
acknowledges
probably heard the lecture.
Of course.
Wellspring acknowledges both, saying, "You are, of course, right, Doctor. I can't say it was more than half an hour." And he looks at Lost for a moment to like get confirmation because he's definitely lost track of time before. But
She draws her hands further apart.
not too much longer than half an hour, hopefully. But it would have been very hard to fall asleep without at least satisfying my curiosity a little bit. I likely would have lost just as much, if not more. Captain, yes, I'd be happy to tell you all about it sometime if you're interested. Do stop me if I go too much into a topic of not of interest, but the material itself is of fine craftsmanship, but what really stood out is the work of the author. So much was conveyed, more than just the words that the night driver spoke the other night. I really got the sense of how important the message was for them to get to us and how we were to be included in the group that was being talked about.
The concept of there being a meaning layered beyond words seems alien to him. But he seems fascinated just by the idea. And then he says, I can't even imagine he didn't even know us.
Yes. Well, think we are currently speaking sea tongue, but you might as a native speaker, use the words for happiness or joy or excitement or glee. But to someone slightly less versed in this language, it might be translated any of those for any of the others. It's that sort of thing. The intricacies of perhaps what was intended with the word chosen versus what the translator chose during the translation. That sort of thing.
Oh, I think I remember something like that in one of the descriptions in the travelogue. I'm 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 thinking that I should ask you about it later. And then looking a little embarrassed, he remembers that there are other people. Oh, is Starfall still below decks? Did either of you-
Starfall
Oh.
has wandered her way up while everybody else was set on talking. Seated herself at the table and started eating breakfast.
Jude
I-
pauses eating when she arrives to once again ask, "How are you faring today?"
Faring is a question for the captain, is it not? I slept well enough, but I dreamed in gold.
Maybe wrong word. Not faring. Feeling.
Oh, brilliant. If the captain is still okay with me, sticking my fingers into his cargo, I may just try something new today, and that always excites me.
It seemed as if what you required was minor compared to the stores of our cargo. So, do consider that we are thinking about selling it at the next port. But if anything down there can be useful to you, and he kind of nods agreeably. And then he shifts his gaze just a little bit so that it's obvious that he's addressing all of you. I think our travels might be a little slow today. Sometimes there's just no amount of expertise that can get Mela and Denard to understand one another. And well, I suppose there is, and then his voice kind of goes a little low, that other thing. But I don't see the urgency to use it right away. So, well, out of character, Paul, did the Night Driver give us like a time frame that he wanted us to get where we're going, or I forget if there was urgency or not.
He definitely wanted to get there, but it wasn't like you're not racing the clock.
Yeah.
Follow-up point of clarification. Did he leave?
He
Or
did.
just, do we know how?
No.
That is what I thought. I just wanted to clarify.
He walked out of the circle and he walked across the deck toward one of the darker corners of the deck, and then he kept walking, and then
Yeah.
he was
Sounds about right.
gone.
That makes sense.
Did the Batman thing. Grain is such a try-hard.
My question posed from Wellspring to Vermillion is, and could you remind me, where is it that we are headed other than west?
Well, more southwest than west, but did the Night Driver actually give me an exact location, or did he just, I think he just said sail in that direction.
He said toward the island of Rondon,
Oh,
north
okay.
of the Wavecrest archipelago, and you know where that is.
Well, of course I do. I say yes. Oh, right, the island of Rondon. I've only been there once. And then he points in a very specific direction as if that would help. Like,
I recall the name. I would have to plumb my memories or do some reading to remember much more about it. But I'm happy simply to have a name. And I trust you and your skilled crew to get us there without trouble, I expect.
well,
Well, without any more trouble than it seems our kind are inclined to run into. I should perhaps clarify.
we have seen,
Truth from truth.
yes, and there was some weirdness, some strangeness that, oh, Jude was also there, but we passed by an island that seemed to have been flattened by a storm and with no trace of any of the people that used to live there. The weather conditions today don't seem to indicate anything like that coming our way, but it was, I haven't seen
Did
its
not-
like before.
It did not seem fully natural.
No,
Was quite strange. Speaking of odd weather, if you get a chance at some point, I'd like to take a look at that. What was the name of the shell?
the
What do you
conch
call
shell?
that? Thank you. That. I know how to do something similar to what was mentioned, but not attached to objects or permanent. Not like
Well,
that.
I got the impression that it's a call of sorts, one to invite, if I were to wager a guess, an elemental of the air to assist us in our travel.
Oh, perhaps that's how. That would be different than beckoning to the, what would there's a spell that affects the weather. Would be different than that, than if it's more calling elementals.
Indeed.
Possibly, anyway.
Vermillion's eyes widen and he just mouths silently the words, elementals are real, and then kind of looks around and keeps quiet. The night driver did tell me to keep it safe, so I've locked it in a place, and I'd probably want to come with you. But yes, of course, anytime that I'm free, happy to take you to it.
That's
I too
fine.
would-
I don't want to do anything that could interfere with what supposed to do. After all, how can it be learned if it gets messed up somehow?
I'm sure if we're careful with it, it will be fine. I too am curious, should my hypothesis be correct, to perhaps have the opportunity to converse with 100 Steps Light's friend? Yes. They seem to have a lot of interesting friends.
Speaking of friends, I suppose I have a question for all of you, if you wouldn't mind. The night driver visited me before all of this, and you all saw what he gave me. And when I received it, I knew that he was speaking the truth, that it was mine. And he kind of pauses to see if anybody's going to object or like decry what he just said. But if nobody doesn't, he continues.
Wellspring just nods understandingly, like, yes, this makes sense. Continue.
Starfall is waiting for you to say something less obvious.
Vermillion's clearly not there yet, and he waits for a moment and then nods and says, so I knew, I guess, to at least trust him that far, and I did have some sense, I guess. I'm sorry, my question is, how do you all know him? And I'm very happy to have you as guests here, but why?
Well, I've been looking for information on how to permanently counter and get rid of magical diseases and other spells by how do I say this? By beings, death-connected beings. So I know the night driver by reputation. By reputation, there was someone met in Sijon named Dust. Dust has a connection to death of their own. And they mention rumors of the night driver. So went looking. In the Confederation of Rivers, there are problems with a rather unpleasant magical disease. Perhaps you've heard of thorns.
We would
Yes.
all have heard of Thorns, the city of the dead.
Yes, of course. The city of the dead.
Yes,
Oh,
well-
wait. Are you talking about? Surely the stories can't be true.
Unfortunately, they are very much true. One of the many weapons used when thorns fell, plague that stuck around, doesn't spread too fast, but when it comes, it is perhaps it is less that it is more deadly than any other, and more that the results of death are. He kind of shudders and looks uncomfortable and disturbed. Don't know that you want those details.
The ones that I have read are quite gruesome indeed. This would certainly fall into the category of things one should decide whether they want to know more about.
Nope.
A wise decision. Believe me, wish I did not know
what? No, things. Perhaps someone else has happier tales. He looks kind of, his shoulders have drooped, and there's this, the cheeriness that he had all morning has faded, and his eyes kind of look a little bit haunted.
Vermillion reaches over and pats Jude on the back.
He smiles wanly at you.
Yes, I could go. I would say my story is perhaps a bit lighter hearted. I met
Boss
a
looks very serious and raises an eyebrow.
well, lost, not all stories always start at the beginning. I was going to skip some things for now.
She nods.
Not that he turns back to the group and says, not that I'm particularly inclined to keep secrets. If you would like to know more after I've answered Vermillion's question about how I'm acquainted with the Night Driver, about the things to which Lost is alluding, I'm happy to elaborate. Just didn't want anyone to think that was a sore subject or anything. Just not necessary. I came into the acquaintance shortly after my exaltation with a colleague, friend even, of the Night Drivers, named Font of Sand and Flame. And since then, he has served as a sort of mentor to me in a number of ways, but dramatically helped me to acclimate to life as a Solar. Still weird to say that. In that time, I was introduced and eventually joined the ranks of a group that the Night Driver and Font are both members of, known as the Broken Order. And I need not at this time necessarily elaborate on all of their goals, but they, among other things, seem to be striving to help those like us, newly arrived Solars, return to the world to find purposes that will allow us to live up to the gifts that we've been given, and to perhaps even help the world come to accept us. So that last bit might just be my optimism in play. So I will admit to not being overly personally familiar with the Night Driver. He and I haven't had particular need to interact too often. But I know that Font of Sand and Flame has a great deal of respect for him, and I am inclined to carry the same, and hopefully maybe get to know him better myself eventually, such that I can have my own opinion as well. But that's the gist of how I know him.
Vermillion nods gratefully.
Oh, I don't know that I have a good answer to this question. I don't really know the night driver at all. But when I had to leave my home, I knew I had to go west. And at some point, someone found me in my dreams. I have a name now. Thousand Steps Light, that was it. They found me in my dreams and told me I was needed. And I don't know, it rang true. I knew I had to be this way anyway, so here I am.
His face softens, obviously looking sympathetic. Well, for whatever reason, I'm glad that you're all here. I've never been alone. I suppose you might say I have the largest family a person could ask for, but I guess that's not entirely true. In some ways, I have always felt a little alone. So I'm glad you're here.
Dust repeats the gesture you made before of clasping you on the shoulder. Kind of with a
You mean Jude?
Jude, why did I say Dust? Probably because in my head from talking earlier. Sorry, Jude. Jude repeats it, claps you on the shoulder and gives you kind of a like just kind of an acknowledging look.
And he looks back at Jude with a gratitude that is specific to Jude.
So how long do we have before we get to, what did you call it? Red
Oh,
Dan?
Rondon. Yes, well, you know, everything is relative. It depends a lot on how the dragons are feeling on any given day. If we were lucky, it would take us about a week. But if the winds are like this, longer.
Wellspring suddenly seems to look very thoughtful for a moment, as if something you've said has struck him. And like even under his breath, voices, couldn't be.
Jude kind of shakes himself for a moment, straightens up, takes a deep breath, puts his shoulders back and says, well, since we're going to be on the ship for a while, it's important to make sure that when we're confined like this, all of us get plenty of exercise. So, anyone who wants to join me, I've got a very good kind of routine for keep getting the blood pumping and muscles working, things like that. Make sure that help keep things from getting cramps. When muscles aren't stretched properly. Yes, that.
Any luck, I'm going to have some other things to occupy my time. I hope.
I will
Although-
join you.
We'll have to see what I can do with the materials on hand. Speaking of,
It's
you mind?
about It's about that time, Captain, that sort of kind of shaking off talking to these new, yes, that you realize that things are becoming strange. The wind has almost completely died and the sails are slackening, even as the crew is working to trim them and turn them to catch the change in the wind. And meanwhile, the sea is rising. And so waves are beginning to roll in strong sets out of the west. And overhead, although the wind is dying all around the ship, overhead there are high, thin clouds that are racing across the sky as if on some great mission.
Oh. Vermillion's demeanor changes quite suddenly. And even though the clouds are probably far enough away that most people unaccustomed to the sea wouldn't be able to see them, he takes notice right away, and perhaps his attention may point that out to the others. Seems like things are about to get worse. This is strange. I assume as a sailor, am I right in assuming that this does not feel natural? Or
Well,
could it be natural?
could be natural. It's a little
Okay.
weird.
Yeah.
It's happening really quickly, which is a little weird. But it could just be a shift in the weather. Although, looking around, there's good visibility. You don't see any storms on the horizon, but that doesn't really mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know weather this area, but that's moving fast.
If anyone would like to make a perception plus survival.
I do.
Is there any version of, and obviously a no is perfectly fine with me, version of a cult that would be relevant to specifically knowing if this is strange, or is it just survival?
Well, just observing the weather would be survival.
Okay.
I mean,
Yep.
you could conceivably like perform a small occult testing to see if like the
Okay.
dragon, like if the spirits are aroused.
Got it. And that's what that would look like and how it would differ. That makes sense. No, I think I would leave it to those skilled in familiarity
two.
with this sort of thing. Oh, well, I
Two
do have survival,
successes.
so I'll roll.
I thought that was bad, and then I saw a 10, so yay. Ones don't cancel 10s in this system, right?
No.
Good.
Ones are only there if nobody else is there.
Yes, that's what I thought. But the different systems that are connected do different things.
Yeah.
Would you let me use sail?
Sure.
What is my, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. So a wellspring, you look around, looks like weather. And Jude, you've been in the West a little bit. Yeah, you'd expect there to be like thunderheads or something with what's happening, but you don't see any. It does, storms come up quite quickly that are not they're not bad, but just like rains, clouds full of rain roll out of the west on a regular basis and just sort of drench everything and then roll on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's two successes. Yeah. So in terms of sailing, you are a little concerned because it looks like you're about to lose the wind and be becalmed with rising seas. This is typically telling you a storm is coming or brewing. Vermillion.
I don't remember. Did the night driver say that the conch shell was a one-time thing or?
No,
Oh, okay.
no. The you're not really familiar with anything like that, but
Yeah.
it sounded like use this to get where you're going.
I don't like the idea of being dead in the water with a storm. I could take one or the other, but both, maybe it would actually be a useful time to take advantage of the gift that was given to us. I'm going to go retrieve it.
I think
Sounds
that
like good idea.
Sounds quite prudent.
Well-
And as he goes towards the below decks to get it, he stops and turns around. Oh, I know about winds and sails, but items like this are out of my wheelhouse. So if one of you wanted to help me with it, he shrugs and then continues.
Jude
I would be happy to.
follows him. As said before, don't know the specific way of connecting it to the shell, but I do know how to affect the weather with sorcery, so should be somewhat familiar. Maybe.
I'm glad we have that. That could be very useful.
We'll do the best. Will be a good backup if this is a problem. This sounds better, or maybe not better. More permanent, longer lasting.
He
What I do, I
shrugs
would have
with-
to repeat.
Hmm.
I could, but would need repeating.
My guess is that's up to the whims of the elemental. Again, assuming that my guess is correct.
He nods at you as if you're talking about quantum physics.
That is not a spell I've learned yet, though. It would be interesting to discover.
So I think Vermillion, with both of them in tow, heads to the captain's room, and the two of you see that there's a lockbox under his bed that is secured, and the lock is actually not what you think it is. It's a different lock that's hidden. So it's actually quite a clever little design. And he's got a few other items in there in bags, which you probably can't see what they are, but then he pulls out the bigger one, which is the conch shell. And closing the lockbox, turning it to its location, he stuffs the shell under his arm and begins walking back towards the deck with both of you.
It's a beautiful shell, and it was clearly cleaned up and buffed and maybe waxed. It's lovely in the daylight. There's more of the violet color of the shell comes out, and the yellow of the beeswax laid into its crease to seal it closed is a sort of vibrant richness that reminds you of honey. So you go out onto the deck.
I would be inclined to recommend that you simply blow on it, unless Starfall has an inclination to examine it. It seems like She has a knack for these sorts of things.
I mean, just looking at it, it's got a seal on. Probably hard to blow through that way. Maybe pop the seal?
That seems like the best idea to me. You probably need to remove the, and he says a word that, those of you who speak river speak, he says beeswax in river speak.
Beeswax would be the word.
Thank you. Beeswax.
Vermillion nods and does as he's told.
You find the wax is supple in the way of beeswax, and it only takes a little bit of careful bending effort with your fingers to pull the wax out of the shell, and then quite suddenly a breeze sort of blows your hair back and ruffles your shoulders, and it seems like there's a smell of grass and tumbleweeds all around you suddenly, although you're not sure why you know what a tumbleweed would smell like, but apparently you do. And it feels as though the wind sort of playfully runs around you and tugs at your clothing.
I think Vermillion chuckles, almost childlike.
Jude holds out his hands for a moment, looks at you and goes, "May I?"
Sure. He gives it to you.
And he's holding it carefully and kind of trying to examine it, see if he can figure anything out about the magic that's on it.
Sure. Make a perception plus occult. And
Okay.
Captain Vermillion, make a just straight up int roll.
Oh shit.
Can I ask a specific question to Paul? So
Sure.
if this is a spell, then I think specialty is identifying, analyzing magic, but if it's not a spell, it's an artifact or something, that would not apply.
You can use your specialty, sure.
Hmm?
You can use your specialty, sure. Go for
Okay,
it.
so int plus occult.
Yeah. Mhm.
So this is a thing that he's supposed to be really good at. Let's see if he actually is.
Seems
I
pretty
forgot
good
to
to me.
put the greater than 6 thing.
You got 4.
Yep.
This is a remarkable shell in and of itself. It's perfect and beautiful and an unusual color. And it occurs to you that it and the wax don't seem to be enchanted in and of themselves. But there is something about the shell and the wax that's familiar to you, in a kind of way of thinking, and you think, and you suspect that a spirit of the wind has been convinced to maybe reside in the shell for a while, and maybe given maybe an agreement was made or something. It's also possible the elemental might be bound, but you don't see any writing. You don't see any signs of like an enchantment on the shell itself. So you're not sure that's the case. So it seems more like somebody who either bound the elemental separately to their will, or maybe just convinced it um, to hang around in this gorgeous shell that was made for it, and help out if it could.
All right. I think you're correct, Wellspring. This seems like it's got a spirit connected to it.
Oh, yes. Let me see about that. And he sort of like just kind of cocks his head as though inclined to view the world from a slightly different perspective, and closes his eyes like for only 2 to 3 times the length of a normal blink. And as they open, perhaps the faintest glint of light flashes over them, though most would probably not even notice, as he looks around the group once more, seemingly expecting to see something he was not seeing before.
Meanwhile, Vermillion blinks for a moment as if remembering something, and speaks into the conch shell audibly enough for the two of you to hear. He says, "Southwest."
And Wellspring, I assume you were using spirit detecting glance?
That was, in fact, my intention.
Lovely.
I have marked down the cost of 1 mote.
Lovely. I'm sorry, I don't look at the chat log in Zoom. So if you want to reach me,
Fair.
definitely chatting in
Slack
is better. Yeah,
Got it. Will do in the future.
because I did just see it. So
nope. Understood.
Yeah. Yes, you see the diaphanous form of a child of Mela. And it's current, and it was kind of swirling around the doctor, beginning to looking like it was beginning to maybe start picking the doctor's pockets. And you see
Wellspring chuckles.
You see like a scrap of paper most of the way tugged out of a pocket that's just beginning to catch the wind and is about to fly off. And when the captain speaks directions into the conch shell, the spirit sort of kind of expands and pulls back, and you see it. It forms pale, glinting eyes out of its misty substance, and it looks at the captain for a long moment, and it looks at the shell, and it sort of skims by the both of them. And Captain, you feel the wind sort of rush against the side of your face, and ruffle your hair, and then a moment later, the sails have gone completely slack, and the crew is starting to pull them in and adjust all the riggings, and they're like, the only comparison is they're like wild monkeys, swinging and jumping and grappling and pulling and cinching lines by grabbing on them and falling toward the deck, knowing that the line will catch and swing them across to the next mast. And there's a sort of silence in the air as the wind has died around the ship, and you can very clearly hear the of the deck of the clipper ship, or of the hull of the clipper ship, as it's cutting through the waves that are rolling across the ship. And then a moment later, all of the sails simultaneously expand, a wind rushes past all of you, and to catch the sails and expand them, and the ship seems to have a moment of almost puppy-like delight, and it leaps forward, and it's possible that parts of it leap out of the water through the waves as the wind picks up the sails and almost jerks the ship forward. There are a couple of soft curses from the riggings as various mates who, with the ship becalmed, had secured themselves, go flinging around in interesting ways, attached to their safety lines as they are. But after a long moment, the ship kind of settles down and accepts the winds, and the crew manages to all get themselves back to their bearings and open the sails again, and the whole ship relaxes and begins to just skim through the regular waves beating at its skin.
Wellspring calls up to the sails above a thanks in Old Realm.
Jude looks at Wellspring for a moment, sees that you're kind of follows your gaze up and says, wait, so can you see them then?
Oh, yes, it is a knack that I picked up in the last year or so. I have quite a fondness for the spirits of our world and have done my best to cultivate a familiarity with them. And it seems that has come along with some abilities that I did not previously possess.
What's like seeing them? How does that work?
Oh, well, I mean, they can take near any form. Sometimes they are familiar. Sometimes they seem playful sprites of humanoid nature, often more diminutive and playful. Do watch out. That one has a fondness for the contents of your pockets.
He pats himself down, sees the paper sticking out, pushes it in.
But
Yes, of
they
course.
can look
But I
like
meant
almost.
never mind. Continue.
But yes, they can look like almost anything. Sometimes I'm not sure they couldn't choose any form. I think some can, and I think others wear whatever form is most fitting for them at a given time.
Meant how does that work for you?
Oh, like how do I do it?
Yes.
Well, as you suggested with the learning of, it's one of the knacks that I've picked up as a solar, I believe, something that we are able to do.
Mostly it works by him blinking slowly, squinting like this, and looking exceptionally wise. Lost says nearby.
Is that really what I look like?
On occasion.
Jude
Huh.
proceeds to imitate
Oh, well.
that. Yeah, it doesn't work right now. I'll have to work on it. Seems useful.
I would be happy to work with you on seeing if it's. I have never considered trying to teach that sort of thing. That said, I've also never had someone else to whom I might consider teaching it. Perhaps we can work on it together.
The doctor and the scholar walk down ship, their voices lowering, talking, shifting through languages as they share ideas and concepts and squint into the distance. Meanwhile, the crafter has vanished below decks, ignoring the offer of one of the mates to show her something that he knows about below decks that surely she might find very interesting. And the captain consults with his mate on the foredeck, where the wheel stands, and they adjust their course, and eventually the captain realizes he's going to have to guide the spirit a little more to the north, or they're going to end up missing the Wavecrest archipelago altogether. And so it is that they begin to involve themselves in their own explorations and in the life of the ship. And the role of the ship has become more of more like the steady back and forth rather than side to side rocking, like you get on a horse running at a steady canter, as the waves push and fall beneath the bow of the ship. And everything is well as the day passes more quickly than anyone thought it might, and night begins approaching until the captain, standing alone, staring into the far horizon with narrowed eyes, is interrupted in his reverie by his first mate, who and he comes up and waits for you to acknowledge him.
The
Clearly
first mate's
standing there at
Rack,
the end.
right?
Yeah.
Evening, Rack.
He nods, and kind of looks over your face for a moment, and then says, Captain, we have a crew member missing. It's the lookoutman, Bergamot. No one's seen him since last night, and I just went and looked in his quarters, and he's not there, nor, as far as I can tell, anywhere on the ship. I don't suppose your Nightwalker took him on some kind of adventure?
Do I Bergamot?
Bergamot.
Bergamot.
Which is a kind of citrus fruit.
Oh, okay. Is he, I mean, all the sailors are pretty competent, but is there any likelihood that he could have fallen overboard? In my mind.
The only time that nobody in your crew is green enough to, or would be drunk enough to have just, staggered overboard. And the only time that really would have happened is when the spirit of the conch shell sort of jumped to the ship forward, but someone would have seen it happen. And there would have been a cry. It's almost impossible that somebody could have gone, could have been up in the riggings and flown off the ship and no one noticed, because everybody was kind of up there pulling sail. And that's the only time you can think of that it might have happened. I mean, you guess anything's possible in the wide world, but yeah, it doesn't seem likely.
I think I speak that concern out loud, and then I come to the same conclusion, which I'm sure Rack does as well.
And Rack, he looked.
Right.
And he talked to people. And nobody's seen Bergamot since last night.
That's concerning. Where could he have possibly disappeared to?
That's why I asked about your night walker.
I don't think he would vanish with one of us without telling me, and I saw him leave. No, I don't think it's him. I wonder if one of my companions might be better equipped to help us.
I didn't take the liberty of speaking to them. Perhaps one of them has him doing some duty in their cabin. And he
Unlikely.
looks like he doesn't believe that.
Yeah, unlikely, although I think we should speak to them as soon as possible.
All right. You move to gather the circle, and that's where we'll pick up next time.
Ooh, yay.
Yay.
Applause.
Yes.
I wanted to say earlier that as everybody left the decks in the background, they could probably hear Vermillion saying, "Mad Dog Riley, how many times have I told you to secure yourself before you climb up the rigging?" And a man double his age is like, "Yes, Captain. I don't want to have to write a letter to your mother or your daughter at port and tell them that you idiotically fell and snapped your head." "Yes, Captain."
Nice. May I say that Vermillion seems super adorable when he was interacting with Wellspring about the books and things.
He's so
Aw.
cute.
Yay.
Also, it's kind of fun having like 3 5 party members and one person who's like a completely different direction.
But he's so enthusiastic about it all. It's perfect.
I know. It's
Mm.
wonderful. That's part of what makes it so fun, is that like very fun contrast where
Yeah.
he's super enthusiastic and cute about it.
Aw. Y'all get to fight over who gets to make him a real boy.
I will do no such thing. I recognize that a man can have many teachers in his life.
Yay.
Also, I'm thrilled that Spirit Sight came up, because when way back at the beginning, when you talked about being a teacher and what have you, I went, I don't actually want you to use the charms for it, but I love the idea of, I specifically didn't take Spirit Detecting Glance early on, so he could see you use it and be like, oh, wait, can I do that? And so I was hoping it would come up at some point, just for that exact interaction.
Nice.
Certainly. It's, I think, one of his favorites. Well, one of his favorite non-lore.
Right?
Though
So
I feel
so
like
other,
I feel
other
like we said
praise. Other praise for your fellow storytellers.
yes.
I loved how each of you have really leaned into your professions, and also the fact not just that this is what you do, but also this is what you love, and especially yeah,
It's a vocation.
yes,
Agreed. There is a lot of passion coming from all the characters.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And
Which-
yeah, Rana, I specifically wanted to call out, you did an amazing job of just instantly picking up on making the like thinking noises. I don't know how you adapted to that fast, but that was awesome. And
Yay!
it made it feel so realistic to me. It was wild.
Mhm.
Thank you. I'm glad that worked.
I also really appreciate comparatively Starfall's inclination to play her stuff close to the chest, where we have like an interesting mix of that, some more, some less. I didn't get to voice it, but I think one of my presence applications tends to be a projection of both a I'm willing to listen to you, and also I will not pester you to talk about things you don't want.
See, I really like that too. How there are some of us we get a lot more detail than others. Like, yeah, it's very interesting to see. And I admit, like, I also enjoy the fun little interactions of the characters who knew each other before. That's very enjoyable. And then Starfall is always like, I love her oh, I'm going to now examine this thing, even if it might blow up in my face in 30 seconds.
Yes.
I mean, you
Also-
did describe her as, is there a red button? Can I push it?
Yes.
She's
She
very
has-
much that. And Paul,
Yes.
Lost is fabulous.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yes, as the player desirous of having her in the story, I am. What is the opposite of dissatisfied? Like, just, and don't say satisfied. I see that look you're giving me, Jesse.
That's not actually quite what I was thinking.
But yes, I love Lost so much.
Oh yeah.
And also I was serious when I meant that I am well aware of the well pun and don't intend to carry it forward. If it's too hard and you keep getting hung up on it, by all means, but like he only, unless he
Use that joke
slips
word.
per Lost, he only makes the joke once and then won't bug people about it.
I'm getting caught up on it on purpose. I feel like it's with the language
okay.
thing, it's one of the things that Jude is very intentionally sometimes going, oh, right
Yeah,
after he does it.
I might in the future then have him do something to clarify how to make Jude more comfortable with that, because that's always the goal. Everyone should be as comfortable as possible. A note, since it came up on, obviously, Wellspring is the teacher, and that is the role he is intended to play. I do have some charms that specifically let me like shunt my XP over to other characters to make them able to learn more than they even have the resources to themselves. But be aware that if you are interested in me applying that, it comes along with you gaining intimacies that Wellspring would choose to impart to you with that lesson. So if that is of interest and you want to see that narrative reflected with those mechanics, it is something to explore. But also, if not, could very well simply be you spending your XP and we just include in the story that he is teaching you.
That's what I want to do with Spirit Detecting Glance.
Yeah.
The other stuff might be useful once we know our characters better, but I don't want to add new intimacies right now.
Yes. It is an important thing I thought to call out after talking a lot about it with Paul.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Though I've already upgraded it to the point where I don't have to put Wellspring's intimacies onto you. He can instill whatever he sees fit through a lesson. So it could be interesting to view at some point in the future whether there is a milestone your character has been struggling to get over, and that a session, a lesson, a period of connection with Wellspring might help him instill in you what you've been looking to instill in yourself all along. Like that's a different narrative angle that is on the table for those interested, possibly.
I mean, from how
But-
that charm works, I would personally be comfortable with it just being the cost of doing business. Like, you know, if one of us wanted you to help them, then you get to tell us what we kind of have to learn or care about to make that happen, right?
Or what he
Certainly.
thinks we should learn.
Well, sure.
Certainly. But I disapprove of a character being given any sort of personality or compulsion that the player is not comfortable with them seeing them obtain. So
Yeah, that's
I just
Very
I
Yeah,
just want to
that's
make sure
a
that,
very good point.
and the flip side of this is also it does cost my XP. So sometimes I'll be like, maybe I want to learn something right now, and so this will just be narrative and not this mechanic, because
Yeah, that was one of the
y'all know
other-
I got a lot of charms I want to learn too.
that was
So
one of
many
the other reasons why I didn't actually want you to spend it on spirit detecting glance. It was just narratively, I thought it would be fun for the character to be inspired / learn it from your character.
Definitely, I love it so much.
And if it hadn't come up for like 10 sessions, then it probably would have waited for 10 sessions.
Oh no, it was gonna come up.
It's one of the primary things.
Yeah,
Yes. It's just, it seemed like a fun little quirky thing.
it is.
So speaking of
I-
experience points,
Ooh.
please take 5. And
Yay.
I think everybody but John has done the cards, the charm cards. So sorry, John, but everybody but John take 1 more. But you can still do it. The extra credit continues to be available.
There is one right now.
You have to
Is
have
there
the
one?
cards to do it, right?
Oh, well, you could use the PDFs if you wanted to take little screenshots or
Oh,
do
okay.
some PDF clipping. You could do that too.
Mhm.
I think I vomited those into the resource channel.
Yeah, they're there.
That's how I was
There-
planning to do it for myself.
There isn't currently a place on the sheets for XP. Yes.
No, there isn't. I
That's
need to
right.
figure it out eventually. Right now, I'm just throwing something in options that's a list, but it's not going to calculate use of it. I need to send it to like Vadim and Paul, my experts, because I have no clue how to do it.
I would be.
I'm gonna have
Interesting.
a little tracky thing where I'm gonna be recording XP and some basic details about all y'all because my feeble brain doesn't contain those things very well. So I can just share that with you guys if you want me to.
Sure.
If you want to just use that one.
Cool.
I'm interested to see the level of calculation in this spreadsheet exceeds even my. I am a
Fancy.
programmer, and so I theoretically understand everything that has been done, but that is a very different level than being able to replicate it to implement further change.
Yeah.
See, I have a
Somebody
roommate who's
nerd
done
loves on it.
tabletop spreadsheets, but I feel like the having to change from bonus points to EXP on this is going to be a hiccup. Or XP, sorry. Also, is the experience for the charm cards regular experience or solar experience, since they're doing 2 kinds?
Regular experience.
Cool.
Alrighty. Well, we're well over our ending time, and I want to be sensitive to that. So I'm gonna sort of call a stop for us. But
Alrighty.
thank you very much, everybody, for showing up today. And John and Rana will understand this, but I was a little bit worried that because I only had 5 scenes prepared, that we would run out of things to do this evening, and I'm glad I'm not the only one that talks. So I'm very happy that we're just getting to the first one.
Yeah, no, we're all just getting to know each other. There's so